The handcuffs clicked shut before Marcus Reed could even finish swallowing his first bite of pancakes. 1 second, he was sitting alone in a quiet roadside diner, his tired eyes fixed on the photograph of his 8-year-old daughter tucked beside his coffee cup. The next, a sheriff's deputy was twisting his arms behind his back while everyone in the restaurant stared. Marcus kept asking what he had done, but nobody answered. Then the sheriff leaned close and said something that made the entire room go silent. "Men like you always think the rules don't apply to them." What happened next would expose a secret so powerful that the sheriff would wish he had never walked through that diner door. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and never judging someone by the color of their skin or the clothes they wear, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this story, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support helps us bring more stories about courage, compassion, and humanity to people everywhere. Marcus had been awake since 4:30 that morning. He was 38 years old, a single father, and the kind of man who measured his life in bills, school pickups, and the number of hours left before bedtime. His wife, Elena, had died 3 years earlier after a sudden illness, leaving Marcus to raise their daughter, Lily, alone. Since then, he had worked wherever honest work was available, repairing roofs, hauling equipment, fixing broken engines, and sometimes taking overnight shifts at a warehouse. He was exhausted most days, but he never let Lily see it. To her, Daddy was still the man who could turn an ordinary Saturday into an adventure. That morning, Marcus had promised Lily he would bring home her favorite blueberry pancakes after finishing a short repair job outside town. He stopped at a little diner called the Bluebird, a place he had visited many times. The waitress knew him by name and knew that he always ordered coffee, pancakes, and eggs. Marcus sat in a corner booth, his work jacket hanging over the seat and his old pickup truck visible through the window. On the table beside him was Lily's photograph. She was smiling in a pink dress, missing one front tooth. Marcus smiled at the picture as he cut into his pancakes. He was thinking about how proud Lily would be when he surprised her with breakfast when the front door suddenly opened. Sheriff Cole Harlan walked in with 2 deputies behind him. Harlan was a broad-shouldered man in his 50s, known around town for his harsh temper and his belief that fear was the best way to keep people obedient. His eyes swept across the diner before stopping on Marcus. The sheriff stared at him for several seconds. Then he walked directly to the booth and demanded Marcus's identification. Marcus calmly handed it over, confused but cooperative. Harlan looked at the license, then at Marcus, and asked where he had been the previous night. Marcus explained that he had been at home with his daughter until dropping her at his sister's house because he had an early job. The sheriff's expression hardened. He accused Marcus of matching the description of a man suspected of stealing expensive equipment from a private construction site. Marcus immediately told him there had to be a mistake. He had never been near that construction site. He explained where he had been, offered the names of witnesses, and even pointed toward the waitress, who had seen him enter the diner. But Harlan barely listened. In his mind, the old work jacket, the dusty boots, the battered pickup, and Marcus's nervous exhaustion were enough to make him suspicious. When Marcus reached for his wallet again, one deputy grabbed his arm. The sudden movement startled him, and his coffee spilled across the table. The next thing he knew, his hands were behind his back. Lily's photograph fell onto the floor. Marcus looked down at it, and something inside him broke. Not because of the handcuffs. Not even because of the humiliation. It was because he could already imagine Lily asking why Daddy had not come home. The sheriff picked up the photograph and glanced at it without emotion. Marcus quietly asked him to be careful with it. Harlan dropped it back onto the table and said Marcus could explain everything at the station. Outside, Marcus was placed against the patrol car as customers watched through the diner windows. His face burned with shame. He kept thinking about his daughter, about the pancakes growing cold, and about how easily one wrong assumption could destroy an innocent person's life. At the station, Marcus was fingerprinted and placed in a small interview room. The accusations became more serious. The stolen equipment was worth nearly $500,000, and investigators claimed they had evidence placing someone who looked like Marcus near the property. Marcus listened quietly, trying to understand how his ordinary life had suddenly become a nightmare. Then he remembered something. The previous evening, while working on a commercial building, Marcus had noticed a suspicious man carrying boxes into a white van. He had thought nothing of it at the time. But now, he realized the man had been wearing a company jacket bearing the same logo as the construction business whose equipment had been stolen. Marcus told the investigators everything he remembered. One detective dismissed it as an attempt to shift blame. Sheriff Harlan stood behind the glass, watching Marcus as if he had already decided the ending. Then the station phone rang. A dispatcher answered, listened for several seconds, and immediately stood straighter. The color slowly drained from his face. He looked toward the sheriff and said there was an urgent call from the FBI. Harlan frowned. The FBI rarely contacted the local station directly unless something serious was involved. The phone was handed to him. For the first few seconds, Harlan listened silently. Then his expression changed completely. His confidence disappeared. His eyes moved toward Marcus through the glass. The caller identified himself as a federal agent investigating a major interstate theft operation. They had been tracking the stolen equipment for months. More importantly, they had identified the real suspect, a contractor's employee who had been using stolen credentials and vehicles to frame other workers. The FBI agent then gave Harlan one final piece of information. Marcus Reed was not their suspect. He was their witness. The room seemed to freeze. The FBI had already reviewed security footage from several locations and discovered that Marcus had unknowingly captured critical evidence while repairing the commercial building. His truck's old dashboard camera had recorded the suspicious white van and, more importantly, the face of the man driving it. Marcus had not been stealing anything. He had been standing between a criminal and the truth without even knowing it. Sheriff Harlan slowly entered the interview room. For the first time that morning, he could not look Marcus directly in the eyes. The cuffs were removed, but Marcus did not immediately stand. He sat there quietly, staring at the red marks around his wrists. Harlan tried to apologize, but Marcus stopped him. He did not shout. He did not insult him. He simply asked one question: if you had listened to me before judging me, how much of this could have been avoided? The sheriff had no answer. A few hours later, the real suspect was arrested. Federal investigators recovered the stolen equipment and confirmed Marcus's account. His name was completely cleared. But the most powerful moment came when Marcus finally walked out of the station. Lily was waiting outside with her aunt. The little girl ran toward her father and wrapped both arms around his waist. Marcus dropped to his knees and held her tightly. She asked if he had brought her pancakes. Marcus laughed through tears and told her they were a little cold. She smiled and said that was okay because they could make new ones together. Sheriff Harlan watched from the station doorway. For the first time in years, the man who had built his reputation on authority looked small. He realized that a badge did not make someone better than the people they served. Power without humility could become cruelty, and suspicion without understanding could hurt an innocent person in ways that an apology could never fully repair. Weeks later, Sheriff Harlan publicly apologized to Marcus. He also began supporting new training for deputies on racial profiling, de-escalation, and treating every person with dignity. Marcus did not suddenly forget what happened, but he chose not to let bitterness define him. He continued raising Lily, continued working, and continued stopping at the Bluebird every Saturday morning. One morning, he noticed a young man sitting alone at the counter. The man looked nervous and uncomfortable, his clothes worn and his eyes tired. Marcus paid for his breakfast. He did not ask for an explanation. He simply remembered what it felt like to be judged before being heard. And sometimes, that is how change begins, not with a courtroom, not with a badge, and not with a powerful person admitting they were wrong, but with one ordinary human being choosing kindness when nobody is forcing them to. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes people deserve dignity, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Every engagement helps this message reach someone who may need a reminder that compassion can change lives. And before you go, I have one special request. Comment, "Kindness starts with us," below if you believe we should never judge someone before hearing their story. Marcus never forgot the morning the handcuffs closed around his wrists. But he also never forgot what happened afterward. The FBI call cleared his name, but it was not the phone call that changed him. It was the lesson. Sometimes the person sitting across from you is carrying a battle you cannot see. Sometimes the stranger you are tempted to judge is someone's whole world. And sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can become the moment that reminds a broken person that humanity is still worth believing in. Because everyone deserves to be heard. Everyone deserves a second chance. And everyone deserves to walk into a diner without wondering whether they will be judged before they are even allowed to finish breakfast.